This video walks through authentication in the Speedwell eSystem. We'll cover single sign-on, using the eSystem password and username, how authentication is set up, LDAP server settings for candidate and examiner authentication, and allocating sign-in settings to users, candidates and examiners. Single sign-on can be used to sign into the Speedwell eSystem or by candidates and examiners to sign into eSystem delivery. In the Speedwell eSystem, the single sign-on button appears at the top of the sign-in screen for users, candidates or examiners. This will take them to the authentication for their organisation. In this case, their organisation requires their email address and password for authentication before they can continue. Users, candidates and examiners can also sign into the eSystem with an assigned username and password. The username and password are entered into these fields according to the rules set up in eSystem authentication. Users may also be allowed to change their passwords up here. Authentication is set up by a user with admin permissions. Authentication settings are listed on the left-hand side of the Admin tab. For the eSystem, the options on the right include password management, so length and complexity, the number of sign-in attempts, lockout and reset periods, and whether candidates and examiners are allowed to change their own passwords. Single sign-on for candidates and examiners is enabled on the right at the top, and there's also an option to disable the eSystem password for candidates and examiners. The OIDC drop-down has fields for extra sign-in instructions, authority, client ID, client secret, and sign-out endpoint. The single sign-on for eSystem users follows the same format. It's enabled at the top, and there's an option to disable the eSystem password. The OIDC settings are listed and populated in the same way. If your organisation is using LDAP, there are options to populate the LDAP server details here, as well as test credentials, login details, and advanced settings. And this allows candidates and examiners to be imported from the server rather than imported from CSV or created manually. eSystem users can also be assigned individual authentication permissions. On the user settings screen, this user has been password enabled, and that can be switched off and on like this. At the bottom, there's a switch allowing this user to sign in using a password, even if single sign-on is enforced. Authentication options can also be set for individual candidates and examiners signing into eSystem delivery. This candidate is password enabled, and that can be switched off like this. And single sign-in only can be enforced like this.